Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. I'm super excited to be talking about the new Olivier Schrauwen book, Sunday. This is a collection of a bunch of self-published things put out by Fantagraphics. I became aware of this project as it was wrapping up because in the last couple of years, maybe the last one or two of these have come out. And I kind of figured since it was going to be hard, really expensive to get like the original copies, that I was just gonna have to wait for this and hope that the production on it matched, because I know they're like these custom risograph things, and I know Olivier Schrauwen is one of these artists. There's been a couple of them that I've been talking about recently, Lale Westwind, and some of the other work that I've looked at, like some of the stuff that people are doing with Piao. There's been a lot of really good examples of people taking really fine-tuned control over their printing process, and I know that Olivier Schrauwen is doing that in the self-published stuff, and I was really happy to see that that's all recreated here by Fantagraphics very clearly. It looks like they are, if there's a change in like spot color, it looks like they're actually going ahead and printing those in the original spot colors, probably not on a risograph, probably with an offset printer, but each like different signature I think actually does have the original spot colors, or as close as they could get within a different print medium. I'm not sure. So really excited to see that, because it's such an important and beautiful part of what Olivier Schrauwen does. Some really cool design stuff on the inside as well. And then, oof, like, wow, I'm glad I read this all in one chunk. It would have been pretty intense to read this more broken up, because it is all just one day represented, and there's such a flow, stream of consciousness, like almost James Joyce type stream of consciousness thing going on in it, that I feel like you have to read it all in one chunk to stay in that. The premise of the story is super crazy as well. This is Olivier, this is supposedly a true story, a biographical story, probably with a lot of made up stuff in it too. There's some obviously made up stuff, imaginary stuff in here, but this is like all one day following his cousin Thibaut on a Sunday, waiting for his 36th birthday, turning, 35, turning 35 the next day on Monday. All his friends are planning a party. His girlfriend's trying to come back. So really just kind of a wasted day, but there's all these other elements that make it a really interesting story. So you get that context up front about like how they came up with this, how they sat down and talked about that day, and how they mapped it out, which is, I think, not something you need to know going into the story, but it is kind of cool, because I think it would be a question you'd be asking yourself: is this all real? Where did this come from? How did he write all this? And so to know that aspect of it is cool. Or that could all be a lie, just to push the story forward. I don't know. The other things right up front here that I didn't like so much is there's like reading instructions, and this claim that this comic has an unusual format that may require some explanations. I didn't think that I thought that Olivier could have had more trust in the audience, that people could figure that out as they went, because Olivier is such a powerful artist that stuff does come across, I think, without having to know. Like maybe it would take 10, 20 pages, but eventually you realize that this book is structured along, this is all Thibaut's thoughts as he's going through his day, and then you'll peek in and out of other characters, and a lot of, I'll pick out some examples that I think are really nice. There's a lot of nice resonances and creations of meanings and metaphors as his interior thoughts line up or don't line up with what's going on in the real world. And this is real world representation of him. Anytime you get just where it's like one color like that, the lighter of the two colors, it's a memory. So there, keeps going back and remembering this one day that he was partying. But again, I think the visual representation shows that. And then there's some other tricks that I'll show along the way, but I think it was all pretty self-explanatory, and it just bums me out when I see an artist not trust themselves enough or not trust the audience enough. And there's a couple other things in here that suggest maybe Olivier Schrauwen thinks that his stuff is more complicated or more difficult to get than it really is, and that's a bummer. But anyways, Tebow is turning 36. He's woken up. This is the beginning of the day. Each chapter or each what would have been issue starts with, on the cover it tells you this is the 2 hours. It's got an image that's made out of what's going to be the two spot colors. And again, showing like the different ways you can do it, whether you have diffusion dithers or whether you have halftones or solid colors, inks printing over each other or mixing or not. That's all present to make this imagery. So really, really beautiful stuff in terms of the image. Tebow is a typeface designer. That's one of the big things about the character and how he thinks about and sees the world that makes the book quite interesting. Even though he's just kind of rambling through his thoughts, there's a lot of very interesting thoughts because he's an interesting person. And he's going to be turning 36 tomorrow. His girlfriend's been off on some trip and he's waiting for her to come home and hasn't heard from her. So here you can see he's texting and his text just going off out into the world. This gives Schrauwen a chance to jump from these more like line-based gridded type of images to images that are more painterly and take advantages of the painterly effects you can get with diffusion dithers and whatnot when you're working for risograph with spot colors. And here you see a little bit more of like how the structure of the story works, where Tebow's dialogue's up here, and then you actually see his girlfriend Magali like getting ready and leaving for the airport. Well, at the same time as he's talking about she probably rushed into the airport. She always takes forever to go. And then you do get these things here where this actually just becomes, it's not drawing anymore really so much as it is painting. Like you're setting up the print plate in a painterly way here, because there's no reliance on line. There's not even really shape. It's just big areas. If people have watched the review of the David B. Dowd stick figures, drawing as a human practice, I really like what he calls the vudic versus the glyphic in there. The glyphic being the more like graphic kind of designer cartoonist mindset, and the vudic being the more like painterly pointillist mindset. So that's why I'm saying this just has a much more painterly feel, and the fact that Schrauwen can go back and forth between the two so fluidly and know when to use them for atmospheric or emotional effect is really, really impressive to me in this book. And then like going back to the more graphic or glyphic by having a cartoon drawing, someone drawing in a glyphic mindset, someone who is someone who, like as a typeface designer, is someone who works in the glyphic mindset, and so would be coming up with these type of very iconic abstractions, throwing line on in that, and then putting it on top of something very painterly or vudic. It's just, there's so much captured in that. It's just such smart decision making, and an artist who can work so successfully in both modes, that's very impressive. In all of these flashback scenes, you're getting introduced to one of Tebow's friends, someone who's now coming to surprise him for his birthday, and that's his friend Rick. A lot of the memories are about this one wild drunken night they had where they stumbled into a sex club, and also goes back in and you'll see there's some other characters that are introduced. Also, like how Rick met Magali in the first place. All of that's playing out in these stories with Rick. There's another subplot going on here where one of Tebow's neighbors is trying to bring him some food, and he doesn't want to talk to the neighbors. He doesn't want the food the lady's sending over. The husband's getting aggravated with that, so he goes to the bar and drinks. So there's all of these like really interesting subplots that it seems like it should all be boring stuff, like, oh, well, I'm having trouble giving lunch to my neighbor. But because of the way everything interacts, because of the constant stream of consciousness on top of all of that, so much meaning and is generated. So many interesting conversations are had. So many interesting ideas come across. It's really a stunning accomplishment in terms of writing and art. Another subplot that's kind of going on, that's kind of adding metaphorical weight to the whole thing, is there's this mouse that's trying to survive, and this cat that's trying to get the mouse and avoid cars and avoid birds, and that always kind of syncs up in different interesting ways with what the characters are expressing. It's just a real like juggling act, and this almost kaleidoscope of different themes and images all rubbing against each other in a way that would pay off on. I'm assuming you could reread this any number of times, once every 6 months, and you get something different out of it. Um, as someone who loves drums, loves playing drums, and like loves the way drums look, it always cracks me up when people have a hard time drawing drums. One of the things I noticed that seems to be the hardest thing for people to cartoon, but this is an especially bad drawing of drums here, where I don't know if this is a tom or a snare drum. Looks like a snare, but it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Usually the drawing's much more competent than that, but that's pretty bad drum set. But other than that, yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful art all throughout. The other kind of stylistic approach that Olivier explains in the front that I think would have been pretty obvious just upon like encountering the stylistic change in the book is oftentimes Thibault will go into an imaginary world where he's imagining an outcome of something he wants. Here he's imagining this is now a new character that's being introduced to the emotional mix of what's going on in the story, is this woman that he's had a crush on for a long, long time before he was even with his current girlfriend Magali, named Nora, I think. Right off the top of my head. So he's imagining they're bumping into each other now later in life and thinking, oh, maybe I'll break up with Magali before she even gets home, and maybe I'll bump into Nora today. And Rick's out, trying to encourage Nora to come and see him. So there is some like potential that hope will pay off embedded in the story. But this, where we just go to like clean line art with the darker of the two colors, I don't think me or any other reader really should need that explained to them. So yeah, like trust the reader a little more. And trust yourself. They're all like really great strategies. Some super cool stuff going here again with somebody thinking of all the possibilities of how spot colors could be combined on the page. Is going on to create some beautiful physical effects on the page that you would never be able to see on screen because you just got to see what the ink's doing. But this is Thibault like getting stoned and passing out and having a dream. And then we see Olivier here being like, okay, well, he's having a dream now. And in the back, you're starting to get some hazy look at what that dream was about. But it's like, we're going to give him his privacy. So I really like that as a way to end a chapter. And then we move on to part 4, and you can see this piece of Nora here. One of the things I really like on the covers is the pointillist work that's being done. The visual color mixing is more obvious because the pixels of that diffusion dither pattern are bigger, and he's really letting you see how the image is constructed. I really enjoy that so many people who are working this way seem to also be working big enough that there's some instruction going on, because I think they're realizing like, hey, I really want to see this in books, so I'm going to teach people how to do it. And that's something I really want to do with Bound as well, is like try and make what I'm doing obvious so other people can steal the techniques and ideas. Really cool idea in here, Thibault being someone who works so clearly with the glyphic or graphic because of being a letterform designer, typeface designer. Here you see him looking at people and abstracting like down to the gesture drawing, but he's doing it in a very like stiff letterform type of way, showing again how that mindset like saturates the whole way that he looks at the world, and that maybe taking a more painterly view, this visual mixing dot-based view, could really change the way you think. And that resonates with me. I'm going from being someone who's really, 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 really like, I'm all about line, I love line, to being someone who's more bringing all that stuff I learned as a painter, working with color and value and area rather than line, to now my print work. It's inspiring to see someone else talking about how, because it really does change how you look at the world when you swap your mindset like that. And so to see that as a theme coming up in a comic's really, really cool. This is another example here where I think Olivier gives away a bit, like, I don't know if it's just not trusting himself or not trusting the audience, but right here just has the character saying, having hot sex on a defrosted corpsicle, which to me, I mean, maybe it's just something in the translation of the language where that's not as clear. But corpsicle is obviously like a frozen corpse popsicle. But then down here, it's portmanteau word blending the words corpse and icicle. That's where it gets into the like Masamune Shiro. Like, we don't need that many notes, man. Like, I think we get it actually. Like, trust yourself a little bit. There's an interesting thought here as well where he's thinking about, and I don't know if this is like just Olivier being such a good writer that he's showing how badly Thibault is stuck in that glyphic mindset, or if this is just something that I found particularly strange. But I thought it was an interesting idea where Thibault's looking at looking up at a mountaintop. He's saying maybe early people looked at the top of the mountain and saw it as a vanishing point. Perhaps they looked at the mountain as a vertical road. So he's saying, and they thought if they could climb it, they could get like into heaven. So it's like the road to heaven. If you're misperceiving the point of the mountain as a vanishing point, it's an interesting idea. But like everything I know about how the history of the ability to even recognize perspective like happened in society and happened in thought, and then the studies you do of like if you get cultures that haven't been introduced to Western ways of thinking, they don't usually think in terms of linear perspective. So I don't think what he's describing there makes sense, even though it's a really interesting thought. And then I wonder, how intentional that is, because that would be something that someone who thinks in terms of flattened out graphic images might ponder. So it's a thing where I'm not sure if it's really great character writing or if it's just like kind of someone not being so careful what they're writing. I really enjoy this spread here, using the Instagram feed as a comic. I think the first time I saw someone do that, at least the first time I saw someone do it, that really slapped me in the face of like, oh my goodness, how have I never thought about that before, was Manjit Thap using that in the book. I forget what that was called. Feelings, I think is what it was called. Did that really clearly in that book. That inspired me a lot for Bound. Also, just seeing the Ariana Arras Instagram page, which is telling a story like that is the comic as the drawings coming out, really made me rethink like how I approach looking at Instagram. So it's cool to see someone else really realizing that and utilizing that in the story. I think people are just becoming more and more aware and more sophisticated thinking about images in sequence, and that's opening up the world of comics quite a bit. A really funny sequence here where Thibault's watching the Da Vinci Code, and so you get to see Olivier, who's a really great cartoonist, trying to do more realistic representations of Tom Hanks. Really nailing it in some panels and really botching it in others. I shouldn't say botching it, but me and Sean have gone back and forth a lot about different faces. Like I think Kevin Spacey has a face like that. He's like early Shatner has that thing. Tom Hanks has the thing where it's such a particular face, but there's also something so bland about it that, like, I don't know, you don't see Kevin Spacey and never not know it's Kevin Spacey, but trying and drawing Kevin Spacey or trying doing a character of Kevin Spacey in line is really hard. And I can see that Tom Hanks has that same type of face. And like, knowing Tom Hanks's face and trying to imagine drawing it, that would be a hard one. He definitely fits in that category. Some really cool things going on as the night goes on, like getting closer and closer to midnight as people get more and more drunk. You get a lot of things that kind of mess with your sense of time and rhythm throughout the page, having images move across the page and breaking up the grids. And then as people get more and more drunk, more and more stoned, like here he's saying there's harmony and stonedness, some kaleidoscopic symmetry. You start getting all of these weird warps, and obviously there's like some tarot card type of stuff going on here. And that ramps up, just after so much of all of the grid throughout the rest of the book. It's really, really impactful, and it shows some of the thematics that I'm talking about in the book are explicitly acknowledged, where it's like this kaleidoscopic symmetry throughout the book, where all of these different stories kind of weave in and out of each other from a distance. And it does feel kind of very James Joyce to me in that sense of like you could take any day and wind up just through free association talking about anything really. And that idea of like anything exists all in every moment seems to be one of the core themes of this book. And then at the end here, they're sneaking into the apartment to wake him up for his birthday. I don't think that's any spoiler. That's kind of given away from just the nature of what the book is. Really love this visual scene here where the Da Vinci Code movie that's been playing with the one bad priest guy, having this image line up like that to look like someone's going to shoot Rick as he comes in, and that moment of pause just shows some of the more really clever visual play in these levels of like abstraction and reality going on in the story that's really, really smart. And then I like the way the book ends. I don't want to talk about how it ends, but I think there's kind of an obvious ending to it that's also like really good but really painful. So I think this is an absolute masterclass of the book. I'm really bummed because I've never had a chance to read the Arsene Schrauwen, I think is what that book's called, and there's an earlier book, and those are out of print. So I'm hoping, like with this being such a big deal and doing well, that Fantagraphics will look at re-releasing some of Olivier Schrauwen's earlier work, collecting the stuff that's harder to get a hold of, because this is a true master, not just a master of comics, but a master of printing. Another thing I want to mention too is the way the cover's printed actually almost looks like there's layers of transparency in between each layer of ink, which is something I really, really want to try. I don't think it would actually work. Maybe it's just all a flat print, and just because it's got a shiny coat over it, that makes it look more like a varnish, makes things look deeper. But it really does kind of look like the ink is clear ink printed on layers, and that's something I really, really want to try, because there's certain color interactions and lighting effects you can't get any other way. And like this glow of this yellow here seems like there's layers going on. So another one of those things that I've kind of been thinking about, and this maybe is proof that it can be done. I'm not sure, but super exciting book. I think it's a must read. Now I'd consider classic canon. This is just masterful comics on every level.